Hi all, my name is Max Lambert. I'm a senior scientist in the science division at Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's Habitat Program. Today I'm going to talk about some of the work that I did last year and this year, in part and largely at the East Bay Regional Parks on Western pond turtles when I was a postdoc at UC Berkeley, and some of the work that I hope to continue doing in the years to come. Before I get too far, I do want to do a land acknowledgement for the unceded Ohlone Miwok lands that much of my work took place on over the past couple of years, and the Nisqually land that I currently am recording this from. In large part, I do really want to thank Tammy Lim and Ed Culver of the East Bay Parks for really facilitating and being heavily invested in collaborating on this research in the East Bay Regional Parks last year and this year. They did a ton of work getting us access and really navigating the complexities of the pandemic, which hit just before we started this work. And to Sabrina Sexton, who also joined in with us this year and helped us with a ton of this work with just boatloads of turtles. And this work really is in heavy collaboration with Jesse Bichelle, Adrian Mutlow, and others at the San Francisco Zoo, who just facilitate a lot of disease work with us and are caring for some of our turtles now who are pretty sick. And Obed Hernandez Gomez, who's professor at Dominican University in Marin, and who's just a phenomenal microbiologist and doing some phenomenal microbiome and disease work with us on our Western pond turtles in the Bay Area. And a whole boatload of other people who've just been phenomenal over the past couple of years. So today I want to give a little bit of background on the motivation for why we're doing this work in these state parks. A big pivot we started last year with a kind of scary realization in Santa Cruz. The state of novel shell disease here in California, particularly in the Bay Area and these state parks, and a few kind of noteworthy observations and conclusions on threats to the East Bay Western pond turtle populations. So a lot of the work that I was doing in these state parks last year was focused on replicating an experiment to look at how impactful red ear sliders are to Western pond turtles. If you are familiar, red ear sliders, which are the turtle in the top right here, are not native to California. They're from the eastern and central US, but they're very common in the pet trade. But people let them go and release them all over the world because as they get bigger, they become bitier and smellier and aren't particularly pleasant animals to keep in your house. And there are literally millions of these turtles released all over California, and there are plenty of them in the East Bay parks as well. And so we're hoping to do some multi-year project to look at the impact of sliders on native Western pond turtles at Jewel Lake, and to look at Western pond turtles just generally at other sites as well. As a replicating this project also at a site in Santa Cruz County in Scotts Valley, which the red area there is pointing towards our pond, which has a pretty good pond turtle population and red ear slider population as well. This is the Glenwood Preserve, which is oak savanna, grassland, a former dairy, cattle dairy, that's now a preserve embedded within a residential landscape. And we're hoping to basically replicate the work we're doing in Jewel Lake and Berkeley here in Santa Cruz County. Until we found out that a lot of the Western pond turtles here have some pretty funky shells that were just necrotic, decaying shells, pretty beaten up, lots of divots and pitting from decay. That really had us change directions pretty fast to figure out what was going on with disease in Northern California. And to kind of give you a high-level summary of what happened last year from our conclusions, which are now published in the Journal of Ichthyology and Herpetology, and I can give a PDF of these findings to anyone who wants them. We discovered the first case of a new turtle pathogen called Emydomyces testavorans, the shell-devouring fungus. First time it's ever been seen in California. Very, very common in Western pond turtles in Washington State, or was first discovered a handful of years ago. And the disease caused by Emydomyces testavorans is a necrotic shell disease. So it literally rots the shells on these turtles. And it's really stymied conservation efforts from Washington State for the Western pond turtle. And we found, we sampled 12 turtles, and 9 of our Western pond turtles that we surveyed were all negative for the fungus, whereas 3 of the sliders that we looked at were all positive for the fungus. So it's not super clear why the pond turtles were all negative and the sliders were all positive, but it does tell us that the fungus is now here in California, and that maybe sliders are actually one of the ways in which this pathogen is making its way around and getting introduced into the environment. But I'll give you some pictures to show you kind of why it's surprising why this pathogen came back negative for the Western pond turtles. This is the first turtle we saw in Santa Cruz that really kind of threw us off. And this turtle shell, you can see these big gouges up here that are just decaying necrotic tissue and just broken shell pieces all around the edges of the shell. The plastron was pretty beaten up as well, had lots of gooey spots. So just imagine if your fingernails were just covered in jello pock marks. The turtle was eventually taken to SF Zoo where it was cared for, and we released it and caught it again. It still had nasty decaying parts of the shell. So something's not quite right with the shell of this animal. This is the same turtle we caught again a few months later after we released it. Still had decaying pieces coming off of it, which you can see here at the end of the dental tool. That's necrotic shell tissue on this Western pond turtle. The other kind of big way this disease manifests is what's called shell bleaching. So the arrows are pointing towards these kind of cream colored, lighter part of the shells that are much lighter than the kind of olive tan or green color that's more characteristic of a healthy pond turtle shell. And on the right side of the screen there, you see it was otherwise a normal looking Western pond turtle shell. So this is very common in the Santa Cruz population that we saw last year. We also just saw just different kinds of decay. So here in the red circle, that part of the scute there on the turtle shell is just jello. It's mushy, gooey, icky keratin. So imagine if one day your thumbnail just turned to jello and fell off whenever you poked at it. That's kind of what we have all around the edge of this turtle shell. It's just decaying. And these turtles all have just really uneven, rough shells up and down. They're kind of very wave-like. Brittle and or gooey at the edges, so just pretty common or across the population, but unnatural from what we've seen elsewhere in Western pond turtles throughout California. And this is surprising again because all of those Western pond turtles were negative for this fungus, whereas regular sliders were all positive for the fungus. But most of the sliders that we were looking at were all otherwise healthy looking. So there's something odd going on with the presence of the pathogen and how the disease manifests. And it could be a completely different disease that's going on here in California. But it's something that we're avidly looking at this year and in years to come. And to give you a little more broad context, what this looks like in Western pond turtles up in Washington State, where it's caused some serious issues. These are CT scans from left to right, top and bottom of the turtle. The 3 turtles, one on the left is healthy, one in the middle that's kind of intermediate level of decay, and then one on the right that's just Swiss cheese, super decayed turtle. All those black spots are just, decaying parts of the turtle shell throughout. We're trying to hopefully avoid this being a common problem here in California. So we're really hoping to understand the pathogen and the disease as it occurs, if it's still occurring across more than just that site in Santa Cruz, and kind of get a head start on it before it becomes a problem. So with that, our goal this year was to take a wider reconnaissance and survey for Western pond turtles and sliders across the Bay Area, basically looking for this pathogen, looking for this disease, seeing how much of this was associated with the presence or absence of sliders. And then Obed Hernandez-Gomez, the Dominican, was doing some really nice microbiome work to see if there are other pathogens that are correlated with Emydomyces and the presence of disease. And Obed also created an entirely new assay to monitor for this pathogen. So we can do this work really in-house, right in the Bay Area, instead of having to send samples out for analysis. So these are the first 9 sites that we sampled this year in 2021. 4 of them are East Bay Regional Park sites. Briones, Jewel Lake, Morgan Territory, and Sunol were our 4 focal East Bay sites. We had hundreds of turtles across the Bay Area that we sampled. I think Jesse and Obed actually managed to get a handful more sites too this summer to tap into this as well. So let's see, what do we find? So in East Bay Park sites in particular, we saw a number of turtles that had a degree of shell bleaching. So most prevalent at Jewel Lake in Berkeley. And what's pretty, I think, stark to me is that the Jewel Lake bleaching bled very easily. So most turtles, you kind of scratch the surface of the shell with an implement like a dental tool used for teeth cleaning. You don't get any blood, but these, with a gentle touch, the bleaching of these shells bleeds very, very quickly. This is common across multiple turtles. This is something we're a little concerned about because that could also lead into the body of these animals for further infections by other microbes and pathogens. So this is very common, again, particularly at Jewel Lake. And we also saw multiple signs of decay, different kinds of decay. So the top left there is an image. These are all from Jewel Lake also. These turtles, the marginal skew at the edge of the turtle shell, are again just jello. They also bled very easily, just mushy shells that kind of fell apart in your fingers. It was very sad. The bottom left there with the white circle, that's kind of a black necrotic patch on the plastron of the turtle shell. And the bottom right was a different kind of decay, which we hadn't seen really elsewhere before, not in Santa Cruz either, which is that bottom whole shield, basically panel of shell, that skew was just almost like wet cardboard, very gooey, oozy, not much blood going on there, but just completely dead piece of shell. And it's not super clear what's going on with that. So we'll get those molecular data back soon and see if the Emydomyces are a different pathogen, but definitely Jewel Lake in particular, though, there are a few other turtles at other sites had some shell disease going on. It's worrisome. And so I'll kind of wrap it up with the 4 populations that we studied, giving you a few other anecdotes for things that we saw the past couple of years that are noteworthy. Jewel Lake is otherwise a great population. It's got a pretty stable adult population, nice mixture of males and females. We do some juvenile recruitment, so we had a couple of 2 or 3 year old animals that we caught both years in a row. So they seem to be nesting. Some babies do make it to become juveniles, and they're surviving across years. The pond dried last year. The pond turtles all left the uplands and came back this year. So they are resilient to some degree of drought and pond drying, which is great. But they are impacted by a few threats. Bullfrogs in particular are a problem at Jewel Lake. Tons of big adult bullfrogs that can eat any sort of hatchlings that would come in there. And then these turtles at Jewel Lake are oftentimes missing parts of their limbs or their tails, so they're definitely getting chewed on by, coyotes, raccoons, otters going in there. So predators of some sort are going to be a problem for pond turtles at Jewel Lake to some degree. And there's also a big road next to it, so a lot of bike traffic, some vehicle maintenance vehicle traffic that could be hurting these animals. And again, this is the site we saw the most evidence for disease at, and so in some there's kind of a multiple set of threats going on for western pond turtles at Jewel Lake. Briones, we didn't spend a whole lot of time at. We hit it a couple of times this year. No obvious juveniles, but the pond was pretty dry by the time I got there in April of this year. But there is evidence now of multiple years of adult mortality. We found 2 or maybe 3 or 4 adult turtles that at the beginning of this year that must have been from last year that were already dead. A little bit of turtle jerky left in the shells. And then Tammy collected shells just earlier this month. Maybe there are 10 to 15 adult turtles that died from drought this year. And there's another pond near this one in Briones, but it's already dry as of April of this year. So really drought and heat are going to be a big problem for these turtles. They have nowhere to escape the sun and the heat when these ponds dry up. And so they're just super exposed. Cattle may be exacerbating things by, making the ponds a little muckier, maybe stepping on turtles. So some work to do maybe at Briones to help make sure that we can keep water in the landscape throughout the year, or at least throughout the hottest time of the year, so that the animals don't completely bake out in the sun. Morgan Territory is one of our happy stories. It's got a really robust adult population, nice mixture of age classes. We caught a dozen hatchlings this year, so they had some good net success. And this is one of those cute little hatchlings this year. And also California tiger salamanders going on there, so it's a nice fertile pool habitat for a couple different threatened species. This population must be to some degree drought resilient because the pond did dry up later on this year, and these turtles probably managed to get up in the upland habitat and hang out and take it easy, and they'll probably hopefully be back now that it's raining again to take refuge in the pond. It's unclear what threats there are at the Morgan Territory pond. That's not too far from the parking lot, but so far it seems so happy. And the last pond I'll kind of note and wrap up with is Sunol Wilderness. And this is that pond there. It's a pretty gross looking green algae filled pond, but just piles of pond turtles. If you zoom in, those are all little pond turtles swimming around in here. There must be 300 in this pond. Hasn't been studied by anyone since Pierre Fidenci was there about a decade ago. We caught some of his animals that he marked again a decade ago. And they otherwise look pretty happy and healthy. This is one bucket, but we had several bucketfuls of turtles that were easily able to hand grab or dip out of there. Lots of hatchlings, lots of juveniles, lots of adults, so good demography of turtles here. Not all is perfect. So this is a quick video of one turtle I saw, and it's only noteworthy because the turtle's eating a stick. And as adults, adult Western pond turtles are largely vegetarian, but they typically are eating green vegetation, things that have a lot more nutrition than woody matter. There's just no food in this pond. There's almost no invertebrates that we were catching in this water. It's kind of just an algae-filled pond with some pieces of wood in it. So there's some restoration work that could be done to enhance emergent vegetation, get more invertebrates in here, some coarse frog tadpoles to really feed these turtles and give them some more food. And the other big part of this is that we had a huge die-off this year that Tammy and Ed documented pretty heavily. I think about 60 turtles were found dead in a very short time frame, a matter of days or weeks. And many were just empty shells at this point in time, but a lot of them were turtle jerky. There was a small bit of water left, so it wasn't a complete desiccation of the pond, but it looks like Tammy's analysis showed there was a pretty high concentration of cyanotoxins from an algae bloom, algae and bacteria bloom that happened here, probably from drought conditions. And so it's likely that these turtles probably experienced a low water, high heat, some degree of poisoning, not much food. So they had a pretty big onslaught of problems associated with probably a degrading habitat and drought conditions this year. About a dozen of the turtles are now at the SF Zoo. Jessie Bichelle and her folks are taking care of them. They're nursing them back to health. So we're lucky we had that partner who could help us take care of these animals. But hopefully we can do some work in the coming years to make sure this population and habitat is sustainable for these pond turtles going forward. To kind of wrap that up, this is a pretty nice population otherwise, besides this mass die-off. They are somewhat drought resilient because the animals that were marked a decade ago survived a couple other big drought years, and so they clearly aren't all dying every year. There's a drought. This year may be an anomaly, but it's climate change, so anomalies become more common. So I think drought, starvation, poison from cyanobacteria and algae are going to become probably an increasing challenge without more restoration work at the site. Cattle may be exacerbating this to some extent too. And the site's also just kind of biologically interesting because we have evidence that there's maybe a hybrid population of both the north and the south Western pond turtles that are co-occurring here. So pretty interesting place. Hopefully something we can keep going for a long time. And with that, I'll kind of wrap it up and just say East Bay Park ponds are great for studying Western pond turtles. They're pretty remarkable how many there are out there. There are a number of threats going on. And my guess is changing pond conditions. These are all cattle ponds largely that are starting to fill in over time. And so some restoration work, whether it's at Jewel Lake, which has a reservoir history, or some of these other cattle ponds, could be helpful to make sure these pond turtles are a little more resilient to changing land use and changing climate in this area. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.